stolen freedom. The ship was moving, but nobody was supposed to be sailing it. The Confederate guards on the docks barely noticed at first. Why would they? The ship was exactly where it was supposed to be, anchored in Charleston Harbor, right under the cannons of Fort Sumter. It wasn't until the steam engine roared to life, in the middle of the night, mind you, that people started scratching their heads. Then it started drifting, then it started turning. Then, holy shit, it was moving. By the time the first alarm sounded, it was too late. The ship was already gone, sailing straight for Union waters. And the guy at the helm? Not a Confederate captain, not a Southern officer, not even a white man. No, the man stealing a Confederate warship right out from under their noses was a slave. And not just any slave. A man who was about to become one of the biggest badasses of the Civil War. His name? Robert Smalls. I'm going to call him the notorious Robert Smalls. And if you think your commute to work is stressful, wait until you hear what he pulled off. This was the plan that shouldn't have worked. Now let's back up. It's 1862, smack dab in the middle of the Civil War. Robert Smalls, he was born into slavery, raised in South Carolina, and by the time he was 12, he was already renting himself out as a laborer so his master could pocket the cash. By the time he was 23, Smalls was working on the CSS Planner, a Confederate supply ship. Now here's the thing about Smalls. He paid attention. While the Confederate officers barked orders, he was watching, learning, figuring out how to operate the ship. And then, one day, he had a crazy idea. A so crazy it might just work idea. What if he stole the ship, not just for himself, not just for his family, but for every enslaved person on board? Smalls and his crew waited for the perfect moment, when the white officers got off the ship to go drinking. Because, let's be real, Confederate officers weren't exactly the brightest bulbs in the box. So at 2 a.m., Smalls and his all-black crew hijacked the Planner. They started sailing it right out of the damn harbor. Now, before you say, big deal, he just drove a boat, let me explain something. Charleston Harbor was a goddamn death trap. It was surrounded by Confederate forts, loaded with cannons and crawling with armed patrols. If anyone figured out what was happening, they were all dead men. But Smalls, he thought of everything. See, he knew the Confederate routine. He knew the hand signals, the horn blasts, even the right hat to wear. That's right, he put on the Confederate captain's hat and faked his way through 3 checkpoints. 3 times Confederate lookouts saw him, gave him the signal, and let him pass. Because why the hell would they suspect a slave was stealing the damn ship? Now here's where it gets intense. They still had one more obstacle, Fort Sumter. This was it, the last checkpoint. If they were caught, boom, cannons, game over. So what does Smalls do? He takes a deep breath and gives the final Confederate signal. The fort lets them through. And the goddamn millisecond they were clear, they dropped the Confederate flag and raised a white sheet. Because now, they had to sprint for Union waters before the Confederates figured out they'd just been robbed. Robbed and outsmarted by a slave, in the middle of their own damn war. As the Planter barreled toward the Union blockade, Smalls didn't blink. He knew that if the Union Navy didn't recognize their signal, they were going to get blown out of the water. But they saw it, and when Smalls pulled up alongside the Union ship, he tipped his hat, looked the officers in the eye, and said, "Good morning, sir. I brought you some old U.S. guns, sir." What a damn legend. Now, here's where most stories end. The hero escapes, the credits roll, everybody claps. But Smalls? He was just getting started. He didn't just gain his own freedom, he negotiated his family's freedom. He didn't just help the Union, he became a war hero, personally advising Lincoln to let black soldiers fight. And after the war, he bought the house he was born a slave in. Let me say that again. He bought the house where he had been owned as property, where he had been told he was nothing. He bought that shit and moved in. He owned that home now, and he finally felt like a success. And then he ran for Congress and won, not once, 5 times. Think about that. A former slave, a guy who wasn't even legally considered a full human being at one point, became a United States congressman. So let's talk about you for a second. You ever feel like the deck is stacked against you? Like no matter how hard you work, life just won't give you a break? Well, ask yourself this. Have you ever been born a slave? Have you ever had to steal a goddamn warship just to be free? No? Then maybe, just maybe, you can handle your shit today. Because Robert Smalls had every reason to give up, but instead, he took the wheel and he took control of his destiny. And if he could do that, then maybe, just maybe, you can take control of your own life too. And that, my friends, is your Monday morning motivation.